Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today to learn about sales tools and your way to guide the client to the close. My name is Russell Worth. I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. First off, this webinar will be recorded, so we can provide this to you afterwards. We're keeping everybody's lines muted here just so we can focus on the content. So we'll avoid any background noises or surprises. I know, Don, I've got 4 kids and a dog, so I always have those pop up. That's normal in our remote work environment. We do our best with these studios, and I think we're set up for a good webinar today. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A all throughout the session. We're going to try to address those at the very end, so definitely ask those as we go along, and we'll make sure that we wrap them up, or we cover them before we wrap up. So with that, all the housekeeping items are covered. Let's jump in. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm Russell Worth, VP of Sales Enablement at Showpad. I've kind of got a fun role to not only enable our own sales team, but meet with a lot of customers to help enable them. And one of the things that's always resonated with me throughout my career and doing this for a long time is that we need to enable sales not to go through a linear pitch deck. All these slides. We need to be able to let the customer get engaged. And the best way they get engaged is asking questions and engaging with the dialogue. And the best way to do that is through a lot of these. So I'm really excited to be joined by Don Poe, CEO of People Productions. Don, you and I have known each other for quite a few years, so it's great that we continue to work together and talk about these great things with some of these selling tools. So welcome, Don.
Thanks for that, Russell. Hello, everyone. My name is Don Poe. I'm the CEO of People Productions, and we are a digital agency based in Boulder, Colorado. We were founded in the early 80s, but Showpad gave us the Sales Enablement Agency of the Year award in 2019, so we know a thing or two about engaging customers using Showpad. At People Productions, we develop the full positioning, the communication strategy, and key messaging guides for major companies. We like to talk to your internal experts and your customers, and then we develop the full campaign approach. We create all this content in-house, from video and animation, print materials, webinars, photography, e-learning, the list goes on and on. But today, what we've all signed up for today is to talk about some important types of sales apps that we've been making for the past decade. I'll start with a quick overview and then show you many functioning apps today.
And so, Don, buyers don't want to sit through all these PowerPoint presentations where the seller's trying to guess what the buyer journey is and where they're at. So oftentimes, and I've been in sales before, and we try to build these overview decks to kind of best get a sense of where the customer's at, but we have to cover a lot in some of those. So what we don't realize is that the buyers lose focus if they're not engaged, and it's really difficult to create interactions and engagement with slides. Yeah, animations help, maybe some quizzes if you're doing some enablement, but what we're talking about today, even though we're doing some slides, not everything you're showing is in slides. We're going to show some of these apps as examples, but how does that seller drive interaction? You're going to have to show the value of your product. You really have to get the buyer to kind of see the art of the possible. So with all these stages of the journey, you can easily lose somebody at any point. So talk to us about how we drive that interaction at each of these different stages.
Well, I like to not think of this as the sales cycle. And I know it's a term we use a lot, and you might actually hear me even use the term at times, but we like to keep the customer's viewpoint as your focus. So we like to answer these questions your customer's trying to solve at every step of the stage. Your customer is doing all sorts of research before they even talk to your sales rep. They look online, they look on your website, they talk to industry thought leaders, so on and so forth. So when it comes to actually talking to your sales rep, what new information can your rep provide, and how can your rep engage them? Your rep needs to add to your customer's knowledge base. So even as things start to loosen up from COVID, how can you give your sales team what they need to have that valuable client meeting? So the apps I'm going to show today will keep your team very nimble. They allow your rep to respond to the questions and needs of their client. One of the benefits of these apps, though, is they also keep your rep on message. These key messages have been developed for your different target audiences, so we want to make sure those are communicated. So that's what we're here really to talk about today. Flexibility, providing your customer a great experience so they trust you and so that they select your company to solve their needs. So as this slide shows, we all know the approaches to digital dialogue. The apps we're going to show today are flexible and can help at so many different stages of the buyer's journey. For instance, if you think of an ROI calculator, oftentimes I think of these as a late stage for that value conversation, but they could also be used early on to spur a new conversation with a tough client. Early on, you could also take a deep dive with your product, and I'm going to show these things called a 3D spinner. These are highly interactive sales tools. But they can also be used later in the state process to impress the CEO so you can get them to sign the contract. And one thing I like to make sure is that we don't forget about post-sales and loyalty. You can use these interactive apps with like your installation and your support teams to show how your product works or show best practices for implementing your service. So using these apps can really enforce the need to continue working with your company even after you make the sale.
Don, I really like this visual that you used to talk about the buyer's journey, not because we're in Colorado and we love the mountains here, but sales needs that underlying process for forecasting and kind of figuring out the next steps, for the business and for the operations. But it's really a suggestion, not a script. And the way you and I, when we were talking about this, that the salesperson is a Sherpa. They need to have gone through all this and understand it before. So while that buyer's there with a map, they kind of know where they need to go. That sales rep, as that Sherpa, needs to know which of these tools to bring to forefront at each stage, because it's not very clear. Sometimes you need the ROI calculator at the beginning, sometimes at the end. Everybody's going to be unique and different. So I think that's what's very interesting and compelling about these apps that your team is able to build.
So let's solve some business needs today, right? That's what we're here to do. And so think about how you, as the viewer, actually make purchases and what you would want when you talk to a salesperson. Forrester did some research around this and found that most customers want you to customize their meeting. And that makes total sense. You don't want the same old presented to you that they just did to someone else. Gartner also found that high quality presentations close more often, but also they said that it creates a more valuable connection with your customer. And that's what your sales rep really needs to establish that relationship to become a trusted partner. So what are experience apps? These are sales apps that sit inside of Showpad. They can appear just like a tile inside a Showpad. You can embed them in a Showpad page or really anywhere, kind of like maybe a Showpad shared space. I personally call them HTML5 apps. Showpad has branded these as experience apps, and you'll hear me maybe go back and forth between how I refer to them today. They integrate really deeply within Showpad and with other third-party systems. So Showpad has what's called an SDK, a software development kit, and these apps can work very tightly with that SDK. But also these apps can connect to other services like your CRM or maybe your ordering system. This is a little bit of a deep dive, and I'm going to touch on this more when I actually show you the apps in just a little bit here. Showpad makes it easy also to distribute these apps to the teams. These apps can be pushed out just like any other piece of content in Showpad, and you can assign them to divisions and groups. You get all the same reports and analytics that Showpad provides with any type of asset. There's also a lot of benefits to these sales apps compared to like PDFs and other static materials. These apps are more interactive. You can gamify the interactions that your reps are having with your customers. You can engage your customer in the conversation and not just talk at them. The apps are also more flexible. We were talking about having that nonlinear conversation that your customers want to have. So you can use these instead of showing them that 30-page PowerPoint that bores them. These apps also do other things like videos and PDFs don't do. You can collect all sorts of client information and data. I'm going to show an ROI calculator. It makes it so simple to collect the information your reps learn in the field during the meeting. During the actual meeting, your reps can enter that information right then into the app. Your rep doesn't have to do anything like pushing the data to your CRM or enter it into Salesforce after the meeting. It happens automatically, and that's going to save a lot of effort for your team. This information that we collect in these apps can be utilized not only as part of that sales process though, but in other parts of your business like product development or when you're like writing white papers. So imagine having all these people doing first-person research and collecting all this data to guide where your product should go. One other unique benefit is experience work offline. You don't need an internet connection to run these apps. Another thing I like about working with Showpad, these HTML apps sit inside Showpad and it simplifies the development that our team needs to do. So things like analytics, tracking, who opened your content, the authorization, security, all those types of things are handled by Showpad. So what does that mean for you? Well, it lightens the load for our developers, which makes it easier, cheaper, and faster to make these apps compared to making them on their own. So I mentioned how I call these HTML5 apps. They are based on HTML5 code, and that means that it works great on any platform. So these apps work on desktops, tablets, phones. They work on Macs, PCs, Androids, and I mentioned several times, of course, that they work in Showpad. But you can also make some minor adjustments to the code, very small things, and you can actually make these apps work standalone on your website as well. There's even methods where we can push these apps to like the Apple or Android store as standalone apps. But bottom line, you have only one code base that we're using when we do all these different versions of it. So instead of having one code base for an iPhone version, a different code base for an Android version, and a different code base for your website, it gets really complicated to maintain all those different versions. And with this approach with HTML5, it's all in one.
Yeah, and Don, as a former software developer, I can attest to how hard it is to maintain multiple code bases and how easy it is, even if you're not a technologist. HTML5, it's a near universal language. It's very easy to build and very easy to customize. And we met years ago on this topic. You know, I was working for a firm that had a large, complicated portfolio. And the challenge we had all these different decks that we needed to talk about the company, our products, the solutions, and the problems. And it was really unwieldy, especially for new reps. It took them 6 to 9 months to kind of figure everything out in the portfolio, because they're constantly trying to assemble their different slide decks and pitch decks. Whereas these experience apps we started building within Showpad because it helps have that interactive dialogue and conversations. We can kind of guide people down the path, back to that analogy with the mountain climber there. And so I really like this and calling them experience apps because we're creating an experience. You know, we're creating that interactivity. You know, this isn't Don Draper coming in Mad Men with, 50 slides and we're going to tell a fantastic story. I think there's a handful of reps that can really do that well today, but so many, we really need our sales teams to be more consultative, have that dialogue, and be able to let the customer kind of pick and choose where they'd like to go with the rep guiding them down the path with the experience apps. I mean, really, this is what you're building, right?
That's right. And so when we talk about the reps, where are our reps right now? Right now, they're remote. But hopefully someday soon, we're going to be back to in-person meetings. And so these apps are future-proof for when we get back together. They're just fantastic in front of clients. But right now, when we're under COVID and we're working from home so much, they allow for much more engaging online meetings. Another thing when I think about reps is training. And we like to design these apps when we can to have training built right into the app itself. The structure of how we design these apps can guide those conversations. And this really helps when you're training on new product launches or you have new reps that you're needing to onboard. Just the way the apps are structured help guide those conversations. But when we also develop those apps, we like to talk to and learn from your top sales team, the top reps. And so we like to distill their approach so your other reps can learn from their best practices. Plus, in some of these apps today, you'll see how we've added talk tracks right into the apps. This can ensure that your team knows the key messages and to make sure that they can message to your target personas that you've developed your content for. Now, when I think of reps, they are not always the most technology savvy people. Some are and others aren't. And so we design the apps to be very easy to use. So with this training built in and the ease of use for these apps, they can really work really effectively for both internal teams, but I also like to think about how they can work for external channel partners who don't necessarily get all that in-person or internal training that you provide to your own team. The training is built right into the app. Plus, when we think about online meetings, these can be easily shared in a screen share meeting. So you're going to see me showing these in just a minute here. There's just so many webinars going on right now. One other approach you can use with these apps is actually part of the webinar. It makes for a richer engagement. It really wows your clients. It increases the interactivity and it keeps people engaged so they can hear what you're talking about. Plus, using some of these data collection apps, you can actually collect information from the people who are there watching your webinar. So let's get into something like that with you guys right now.
Yeah, let's launch a poll. Let's get some interaction. So if everybody could take a minute, I'll leave this poll open for about 30 seconds. Just answer these questions about where you feel your reps are losing most engagement with your buyers, at which sales stage. And then does your firm have a big Excel ROI calculator of any type? You know, I know with my background, it's very easy for some of the best sellers to want to be able to demonstrate and show impact. And so these calculators are often constructed by sales and sales engineers to try to do some of this math to help build that business case. The sales reps talked about the story of the value, of the differentiation, of the features, and then it comes down to that ROI calculator to really prove the business case. How can that go into that proposal that somebody in legal or finance needs to review and approve that says, what am I buying and what kind of outcomes can I expect? So I've worked for a lot of companies and a lot of them have had some of those big giant ROI calculators that are pretty unwieldy. Without looking at the results, it looks like a lot of people are having struggle with getting interest in the first few meetings. With some others from getting from proposal to purchase, probably where ROI calculators might come in. Some others unknown there, but looks like only one has some of those ROI calculators built in Excel. And hopefully people answer that thinking Excel or Google Sheets or any other spreadsheet type tool. We'll end the poll here now if you want to jump back in, Don. Thanks.
Great. Well, I know one of you mentioned that you had an ROI calculator, and I'd like for more of you to explore how these work. An ROI calculator or a cost analysis tool can work great with the value sale and prove to your customer that your product can save them time and money. So we like to use the information we gather from the customers to create a custom report that can be shown to their administrators and to their purchasing board. This helps establish your company's value to them. I have seen a lot of different ROI calculators over the years, and oftentimes they're messy and complicated with way too many tabs at the bottom. And we like to make them simple to use. And we like to create data charts that are more useful for your customers than just those big data dumps. And so we make them visually appealing and tell a clear value story that you can, that your champion customer can give to their purchasing manager. So throughout today, I've actually got my iPad sitting here next to me. And this is actually Showpad on my iPad. And I've got QuickTime running on my laptop. So I can show you how these apps work. So I'm going to switch over to that right now. And as you see me sliding up and down, this is actually my version of Showpad. And I'm going to, in this atom, where we have a lot of different apps here that we can talk about. And so I'll keep this brief because I know only one of you said that you had an ROI calculator, maybe a couple of you didn't get to answer. But we like to keep several tabs along the top to show kind of where the app can go. But to keep it really simple, there's a really big button to make it easy to know where to start. So I hit start. And here, this is a data collection app. And on the left side, we've got a series of questions that your sales rep can ask to get information. I've already pre-entered this, so you don't have to watch me type today. But we've categorized this into different sections so that it's a natural flow and it makes it easier to get into these different parts. While I do that, over here on the left side, this is an ROI calculator. And you can see at the very beginning that they go down a little bit because they had to invest in this new technology. But from there, based on the customer's information, we can show the ROI. Whereas like this chart here, gets to the bigger picture needs. For instance, like this shows how the patients respond to using this technology to patients who aren't using this technology presented in this app. So if I come down here and I change a setting, you can see that it animates right there. And down here, it says generate report. And so this is a really important part. This is one area where we integrate with Showpad. And we didn't have to generate and create this email functionality. This is built into Showpad. We are now sharing this information. It creates a PDF, emails it out, and Showpad does all this analytic tracking for us. It sends this PDF as a link, just like when you send an asset out. So it's not a big file that gets sent out. So your rep can see if your customer opened the file, how often. At this point, you can see if you ever have a really hot lead you need to follow up with. Another thing that I find interesting about these kinds of apps is not only can we send them to the customer and your sales rep and maybe your sales manager, but you can also send them to like your product development team. This can help guide new product developments based on the research that your reps are doing out in the field. Or maybe you send this like to your research team who are writing white papers, and they can aggregate all this data and show how, where the industry is going. Write some really interesting white papers. So let's move on to another type of app. This is what I think of as our interactive showcase right now, and let's dive into how the products work. And this first one I want to show is just so obvious that I'm going to get right to that right from the start, and I'm going to close this one out. And I mentioned a 3D or a 360 spinner before. And right here, it's got a landing page, and I've got 2 dots at the bottom of the page, excuse me, to let me know where I'm in this app. And this app is pretty small. There's only 2 pages, and I'm going to swipe to the next page. And here's the product. And I'm going to use my finger, and I'm just swiping across the screen, and I'm spinning the product around. And let's say I hit this spot, and here's an animation showing how the device works. And a button here that has the key messaging that I want to make sure the rep hits on when they're talking about this device. Here, I've made the device go see-through, and yet I can still spin it around. And so our 3D artists have removed the proprietary parts of this device to protect it from the competition when we're showing this. But under COVID, it's hard to show your products right now. So an interactive spinner like this can truly enrich your conversation. But when we meet in person again as well, these can be more effective than carrying all of your products around in the trunk of your car. Plus, some products are just too big or get damaged when you ship them around. So we've been doing a lot of technology tools that to show how they function. To get started with these, we work with the CAD files that our clients provide to us, or we can take photos and use those, and your team can make those, or we can take them. One of our clients had about 30 of these spinners done. It allowed them to show such a wide portfolio of their product. Plus, using this type of tool, you can truly explore your products. You can take your product apart, and that's what we think of as a product explode. You can have hotspots at every stage of that inside your device to show key messaging at each one of those stages inside of how your product works. So we've created apps like this that walk through more complex products than this one, but this gives you a sense of how these work. Let's move on to the next one. The next type of app I wanted to talk about is what I think of as a technology explainer. This shows your product in use, but it can also show like the workflow of a service that you have. These type of apps gamify the conversation with your client, and it makes it much more memorable for your client to know what you were talking with them about, because the way we've built these apps actually touches on adult learning theory. So the messaging that your customer provides through an interactive tool versus a static tool, it gets embedded with your client more. So this one has tabs along the bottom, and you can see that there's a lot more dots too. This is a bigger app than the first one I showed. And so just so you can understand what this product does, this is for a medical device company, and it's a wand that gets inserted into the body, and it can kill a tumor. So let's go to the next page here. When our team worked on this, we understood that talking about the competition and how the competition worked was a really important part of this. So we showed, after talking to the engineers, we understood here's how the competing technologies worked, and they didn't kill the tumor in the right way. Whereas in talking to the engineers, we designed how the technology worked in a more optimum manner. On this next page, this shows how the technology actually functions and works. So instead of having like a static video, I've got a video, a button here that shows here's how it works. First, it senses where the tumor is, and another button to go to the next stage, and it cools the wand so it doesn't burn other types of tissue. And here's the coup de grace image where it's actually killing the tumor off. And so you can actually have your customer run through this and train the customer on how the steps work, and it makes them even more comfortable with selecting your company. I did talk about videos. Now, this is one area where we like to see how many different ways can we use the content we're making. Now, let's say you're at a trade show again someday, and this video is here, but it's also up on the big trade show booth, and maybe this is also on your website. So we can host all of this kinds of content in here. This shows how the product, this is kind of like an explainer video of the product, but you could also have other videos in here like testimonials or case studies, so on and so forth. This next page breaks down the components of the system. So here are the different parts that come with the system and some key messages that we want the rep to be sure to hit on when they're talking through it.
You know what I like about this, Don, is one, you're creating a lot of compelling content here that you can go back and forth depending on the user. You don't have to worry about things like flash animation or any of those complicated things. You're showing this while it's on a tablet, virtual tablet on a Zoom here. It flows very nicely. You could just as easily bring up a Showpad web interface and have the apps work in the same way. So we're really showing this performs extremely well. And it's extremely rich in the fact that you can talk to business level benefits, to technology benefits, and all things in between, because oftentimes our conversations with buyers, there's multiple stakeholders. So we kind of need to align them on the same concept. And I really like that approach that you have there with static content, dynamic content, interactive content, and the videos, just bringing it all together in a very simple way that any seller, honestly, with a little bit of training, they can jump in and be effective with this tool.
That's right. And when you're talking about aligning, I think that really brings up the next kind of app I'd like to talk about. A playbook. And recently on the SE Society, we were talking, .org site, we were talking about playbooks a lot there. And so playbooks are useful for so many different things. A lot of companies do use these. They're great for training and onboarding, new reps. And I meant, both internal teams and your external channel partners. We like to talk to the techniques of your top sales reps and push these into these apps to help all of your team use those best practices and distribute that knowledge from your top reps down to everyone. And it really standardizes your sales process. And as far as sales processes go, I know many companies use sales methodologies as well. So a playbook can help implement your sales methodology at every stage. With training, playbooks are great at getting teams up to speed on your new products and launches. And you'll see in just a minute here how we actually built talk tracks right all into one place here in this app. So here's a playbook we made, and it's for this fake company called Lumenity. The original company we made this for didn't want their playbook shown, so we reskinned this to make it, I can show you the concept of how this works. But if you look really closely at the messaging or some of the graphics, you can see where it wasn't necessarily done by, for true strategy. It was just a demo. Here's how it works. But this has a prepare mode and a present mode. And let me start with present. We start with what role are you presenting to? Are you presenting to a governmental person, or a residential client, so on? And where are they in the buyer's journey? Maybe they have a plan, but now they have some pushbacks. And in talking to the reps for the company we made this originally for, we understand these were the real pushbacks we had for this type of customer. And so maybe they're comparing companies, or they're worried about performance. And here we can have some answers built right into the app. I can make this big. There's a share button up in the corner. So again, that gets to the concept of using the Showpad SDK to email this piece out. These answer the pushbacks that, oh, sorry, Russell, if you had a question.
No, I was going to say what I like about this, Don, is if you're a rep, it's one thing to go through all your readiness training, We've kind of certified people. Do you know about this? But then it's always great to have a reminder because there's always so much to know as a rep. The different dimensions of your buyers, their problems, their pains, their current situation. So these are great refreshers. Very easy to come back in. I don't have time to go take another certification test, but it's the same thing I was trained on. So I can come in and refamiliarize myself in the playbook with a very specific situation and get to it really, really quickly to either respond in real time during a call with the customer or immediately after that call.
That's right. And so the way this one's structured is actually as a competitive response guide to help with those pushbacks you might hear. And answering pushbacks isn't always about just being right. The content in here really is to spur those conversations to let the rep dig in deeper for the issues that your customer's trying to solve. So as we look at this, you were mentioning Trainingrussell. This does have the talk tracks. It's formatted in exactly the same way as you can see here, but it has these talk track bubbles that are based on the persona we're presenting to. So, a governmental person will have one thing here, while a commercial customer would have a different messaging built right into the app here. So by having all of this training within the app, it's almost like muscle memory for the rep. So instead of going over to like one PowerPoint or a PDF to learn about the messaging, it's built into the same app that they're using. So it's just so much more easy to learn from this type of app. So presented here, this is a competitive pushback app. But if you take a step back from this, you can think about how this could work for other needs. So maybe you have a catalog or a lot of different divisions and you want your reps to be able to jump from group to group. So imagine maybe you're like GE and you could have like your aviation division here, your healthcare division here, your power division here, and have the content for those certain areas. Or envisioning it in a different way, imagine you are Apple Computer and you're selling iPads and iPhones and maybe Mac computers. Okay, great. You want a computer, here's the laptops, here's the desktops, here's the size of the screen, the size of the processor, so on and so forth. And so it could work as a product recommender and get right down to the asset that needs to be shown, or the product that makes the most sense for your customer. So one other thing in here is these assets here at the end can be pulled in through this the SDK. And I'm going to show that in another playbook because I've got another one here that formats this in just a slightly different manner. And I thought it was important to show how these can be different. This one also has a prepare and a present mode, and you can see it's for this fake solar company because, again, we couldn't show the real thing. This time I want to show the prepare mode. We start with these probes because here the roles we have are psychographic based. They're not based on the type of, like the CEO or the technician. It's based on what is their opinion of your technology. And so here we have probes. These are the questions that a rep could ask to understand what kind of person are they presenting to, because maybe going in, they don't know if they're presenting to a champion or a skeptic. When we originally made this, we had ABC. We considered having like ABC answers here, where a rep could say, okay, great, according to this one, it's a B, and this one, I'm going to answer D. And the app itself could generate a response saying, well, we think you probably have a feasibility evaluator here, for example. But the customer we originally made this for, though, their reps were so highly trained that would have been insulting to them to hold their hands so much about it. So we customized the app based on the kind of rep who's going to be using it. So if I look at a feasibility evaluator here, we have the messaging because, again, we're in the prepare mode. This is the messaging, and a feasibility evaluator has these 2 messaging points, whereas a solar champion has 3 different messaging points. And so here, messaging point 1, they have this kind of green dot. Messaging point 2 has this silver dot, and messaging point 3 has this brown dot. Of course, I can open these assets here and take a look at it and learn. But then when I come back home and I go to present, I've taken out the names of the type of persona I'm presenting to. I don't necessarily want to tell them that I think they're a skeptic. So here's that solar champion, and all those colored dots are now referenced back to the messaging points. As you recall, messaging point 1 had one color, messaging point 2 at a different color. And those are all represented here. So when your rep is presenting, they know when they're presenting this piece that they're presenting on a certain messaging point. This uses the Showpad SDK to pull all of these assets into the playbook. These aren't hard-coded into the app. We use Showpad tags to say that certain assets go with messaging point 1 for the persona 1, or messaging point 3 for the third type of the persona. So the benefit to this is that your assets can be automatically entered into this. You don't need to come back to us to change the content in here or to update it. Let's say you change a PDF or you want to add one more asset in here. These are all PDFs. This could show videos or anything like that. But you can use the Showpad tagging feature, and we use the Showpad SDK to pull those assets in. A second way we use the SDK is, let's say after the end of my conversation, we've talked about these 3 pieces and I want to send them out. Down here in the lower left, I've got an arrow, and here's where we're relying on the Showpad to send these as links so we can have a shopping cart of these assets sent out to the customer after the fact. And of course, Showpad gives us all those analytics about, is this being tracked, or have these been opened using the share reporting tool. One other interesting thing about Playbooks is these can implement a continual improvement process at your company. Your reps can not only send these out to their customer, but they can also send these assets up the chain to like their marketing manager or the sales manager and report on what's going on in the marketplace. Here is how these assets function, and here's how they work. And maybe they hear new types of pushbacks, and they can report up the chain as to what the reps need. It allows your team to shift on what is in the marketplace based on what your reps are doing. It encourages a dialogue between your marketing and your sales teams. So these playbooks can be configured in so many different manners to train and standardize your sales process. But when it comes to sales, let's get to a very important part: generating the quote or closing the sale with a proposal.
I had one more thing on playbooks, Don, that I liked about that you mentioned. I think it's important, is that they change, and the fact that you can make those changes with the content, with the tags very quickly. You don't have to come back and recode anything. If this is structured in the right way, that dynamism can be supported because change is constant in sales and marketing. And I like that if I'm in marketing or I'm in sales enablement, all of a sudden we discovered something we need to add to the playbook, we just add that content, tag it the right way, and it's instantly available. There's no recoding or anything like that that's required.
That's one of the things I love about Showpad, is just how it can pull those assets in. It makes it so easy to develop some of these apps that we've made, because sometimes all the content hasn't been made, but we can still keep the app fresh by pulling everything in. And some of our clients actually use these apps as a one-stop shop. Like the reps present only from the app, these experience apps, but it has all this other kinds of content. The videos and the PDFs and so on are built right into the app, so they don't have to jump around, although they still can in Showpad, but the app becomes like a one-stop shop for the sale. So let's move on to quote builders and proposal builders. And so instead of handwriting a bid, or yet again sitting in front of Google Docs or Word and writing a proposal, finding like maybe an old example one and having to like adapt it, let's do this all right in Showpad. It makes it so easy to do this with these types of tools. Plus, it simplifies the data collection process. A quote builder can streamline your workflow for creating all sorts of kinds of budgets and proposals. Excuse me. So we can automate the process also within Showpad. We can save the data inside Showpad, and like using an API, we can push it to an external ordering system, and boom, your order is placed right from inside Showpad. Maybe you need a simpler process. Maybe you don't have an ordering system. And instead of working with an API and pushing the order directly into your ordering system, this app can send an email out to your customer or to your sales manager or something for them to review. So let's take a look at this. So this one is actually, we structured it vertically instead of horizontal. And again, this one's reskinned, and we wanted to move on from working with this fake solar company. So for this one, we reskinned this app for a snowboarding company that is selling snowboards to a big resort for their rental department. I'm going to enter my information. Of course, when you're making a sale, you need to know who you're selling to. And so here I'm entering in this information. And now we're set to go. This next page filters what you're going to be talking with your customer about. And so here I want to limit it to these kinds of items that I'm going to be talking with my client about. And here are just those items. And so, great. This is generally later stage. You're not doing a sale on the first day. So our customer probably knows a lot about this, and they want a couple of these snowboards and a couple of those. But really, because we were dealing with rentals, we educated them more on the lower end snowboards. But let's take a couple and push the price up to the higher end models. And yes, we do need a couple of these, but this red one, I just don't know enough about it. And so right in here, in the sales tool, in the quote builder, we've got product information. So here's some specifications. And here's another PDF. Again, this is one of those areas where we can use the Showpad SDK to pull more product information into this app. It doesn't have to be hard coded into the app. You can add another video in here or so on and so forth. But great, now that I've seen this, I would actually like to buy a whole lot of those. That looks very interesting. And I'm going to move on to the next step. Down here at the bottom, it has all the items that we decided to buy. And let's see, I actually need a couple more of these. And yes, I do want the 2-year warranty. So here we have these last minute add-ons are added right here. And yes, I do need a couple of edge tuners, but the Vice kit, I'm just not sure. Let me look at those. Okay, great. I can understand more about that. I'll get one of those. So everything is right here for the sales rep to go through. Here's the total price. And I'm going to sign right here on the dotted line, agree to the terms and conditions, and place the order. So our app can at this point integrate with the ordering system and place this order directly into your third-party system. Or we can use this and email a PDF of the order to your client or your manager. But at this point, the sale is really done. Let's look at this from a different kind of angle, though. As a proposal builder, instead of a quote builder, so instead of taking in an order, we could use a similar process in this app to build out a proposal that simplifies and speeds up your proposal writing. So you'd still start with entering the information of your client at the beginning and select which parts of the proposal you need, like the extended warranty or the shipment selection. Maybe you need the insurance page in there, whatever. And so you can go through there, and after entering this information, you can pick out which parts of the form you want. The app automatically configures all the right pages into a custom proposal for your client because you can still have the ordering information in there as well. Bottom line, you can enter in all the details and pricing of the order, customize it, and your rep has built a proposal very quickly. It's all inside a Showpad, and it's all saved in one centralized location. So maybe a sales manager needs to review this before the proposal is sent out. We could have one version of this app for how the sales rep, what they need to enter, but another version that shows the approval process for your sales manager. And as for the customer, you can put this on a shared space, or you can email it out inside a Showpad, and you can track that it's been opened.
What I like about the power of this, Don, is you can move at the speed of the customer, because oftentimes, I've been on the other side where I've got an urgent need. I'll come back to your snowboard analogy. We've got snow coming in Colorado in just a few hours, maybe a day. I need to get a snowboard fast. Maybe it's not quite like that, but maybe I need to buy some type of business product. So this lets me get from ideation, understanding that right to the quote really, really fast. So we can kind of avoid some of that friction of doing business. And this is really what creating an experience is all about, simplifying B2B and the buying from start to end. And I really like the gambit that you covered there in all these different experience apps to really make it a little bit easier, more consumer-like almost in some of these apps.
That's right. We always look for ways to decrease friction in the sales process. And that's why I like adding those assets, those items at the last minute. It makes it so easy for your sales rep to still talk about those other items. But so today, we've talked about ROI calculators, cost analysis tools, product and technology brochures, Playbooks and training within the app, and ordering and proposal building. There's a bunch of apps I haven't gotten to show today. There are things like a launch book. This is an internal tool that sits inside a Showpad that provides training on messaging, product functions, features, competitive issues, what the campaign looks like, so on. And we've seen these before where they're static PDFs and the sales rep, flip, 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 okay, I got it. But if you add interactivity to it, we're using adult learning theory to embed that training in your sales rep as well. There's another type of tool, a diagnostic or a benchmark tool. These can help customers understand where they stand in the industry and compare them to their competitors. A recommendation tool. Now, I talked earlier about how a playbook could be a recommendation tool, but this type of tool is a data collection tool. It takes in their information to suggest a specific product. Sell sheets and product brochures. Everyone has to have them. They're often static PDFs. We like to create interactive sell sheets with lots of touch points, hotspots, to make it so you can explore the content in there. And again, it engages your customer. We've even done projects where we can look at a third-party database like Microsoft Dynamics or SAP, and we can use that the API through those systems and automatically build creative and interactive sell sheets. So instead of having to hand do them, we can take the data dump from the database and create 5,000 interactive sell sheets that are based on a template, but it's done automatically. Mapping is another kind of app. You can have a map that shows where your authorized dealers are, or you could have like a mapping service that you enter in your address and you can find out, maybe your Quest, like an internet provider, can I get fiber internet at this address? Another type of tool, a scheduling tool. This again works with a third-party API to work with your scheduling system, and you can set up the repairs or follow-up meetings, the installation date, order placement timelines, all those kinds of things can be brought right into these apps. Again, all in Showpad, so you're not having to go to different systems. One type of app that I really wanted to show today, and I just don't have time, is a software or a hardware demo. This is a highly interactive version of your software or your hardware, and we can actually make it somewhat function in Showpad and have hotspots and bring up things so people can actually operate your software or your product. As we brainstorm, there's lots of other types of apps that I haven't even listed here. Like we've been doing a lot of tours of facilities with 360 cameras. We talked about those product explode versions and how you can compare, do a competitive comparison in some other different ways. So one question I often hear about is like, well, how do we get started with this? These seem big. And one thing I suggest is don't make your app too big. We've seen companies that want to put the kitchen sink into the app, and we find that it becomes unwieldy. It's better to have lightweight, strictly targeted apps that are more strategic and can get done really quickly. You don't have to come to us with a full wireframe of what you want the app to do. We can walk through the strategy and the creative decisions of what you're facing. We just need to know what issue your reps are facing, and we can help formulate that app. So one of those playbooks was actually done in that kind of regards, where they just said, our reps are getting beat up in the field, what can we do? And we built a custom playbook for them as a competitive response tool. So first, we like to discover and define, what issues are you trying to solve? And we create a sitemap and a wireframe. Design and development, we apply your branding to the apps and make it look good, and we actually get coded, and then we deploy it and we help you get it into Showpad, or if we make some, again, we can make some minor changes and we can put it into your website or other places. One key final step, though, is what I think of as cultivating, and this is a really important step. We look for ways to train your reps on the app. So maybe we have a simple video or a PDF that comes along with the app. We look at the analytics that your team has done for how the app is being used, and just verbal reports from your sales team of how the app has been effective for their team. And we use that to iterate, because oftentimes we find once you do one app, you want more, and we use the learning from the strict analytics and the case studies to see what works next. And that's what I think of as cultivating, is training the reps on how to use it and reviewing those analytics. So As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this kind of work. And for over a decade, we've been bringing marketing and sales teams together in sales enablement. And I just personally love solving business issues and talking to people. I welcome you all to get in touch with me at don.poe@peopleproductions.com, as you can see here on the screen. And we can set up a call. But also, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have right now, too. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Don, for the great discussion. Really great insights. And yeah, probably could go another hour with all those different apps that you're able to do. So really great showing us the art of the possible and where everybody's going. PDF, I think, had a great start because it was universal. Now we're kind of moving towards HTML5 and web because that's universal. And with Showpad as a great deployment mechanism, I think that just makes it easy. And one of the questions was, how easy is it to get started? Because I'm in marketing, I don't really know how complicated HTML5 is. So how hard is this in terms of cost, time to market, potential impact? That's one of the questions we put here.
As you can see, the scale of the apps that I showed today was really quite varied. And many of you have probably produced videos as well. And so sometimes there's simple videos and bigger, more complex videos. And I would say that the pricing for these is actually similar to producing some simpler videos or some more complex videos. And what I have heard is that many of our customers have reported a really fast ROI by using these apps, that they're able to close faster and bigger deals with using these apps. So they seem to be quite a good investment for the companies we make them for. When you think about pricing, there's kind of two ways we break out pricing. Sometimes the app is straightforward enough and we can price out the app in of itself. Other times, we do what's called a discovery process to start, where we start to ideate what's possible, coming up with wireframes and solving the issue, but we don't know how big the app is yet. And so we break out the discovery phase from the actual development phase. And it's kind of like building blueprints for a house, where you want to make sure you're structuring the piece right in the first place before we start budgeting, like, well, what's the foundation looking like? One other thing I think about when I think the budget aspect too, is how can we leverage this in many different places? Again, if you have a video inside this, maybe you already have the video and you can put this in and you can use your content you already have in more ways. Or oftentimes, like with that 360-degree spinner, oftentimes that's something that actually gets taken out of the Showpad app and placed on the website, because those are such fun interactive tools for your customers to use. So we look for different ways for how many different ways can we leverage the content that's being created in not only in Showpad, but in other ways as well.
That's great. That was one of the other questions that came up is, so, you can very easily lift and shift and you repurpose these, without a lot of recoding. In fact, very minimal, if any, it sounds like. And then, last question I've got here, because I know we're wanting to end on time. How easy is it to update these apps? So after you've built something, and all of a sudden something new comes along after the product launch, or rep they're using the tool and they've got some feedback. So how easy is it to provide a minor update?
Well, we like to use the SDK where possible, so other content can be pulled in automatically. And that's one of the really simple ways to update an app, is by making it flexible enough to use other types of content within the app. Which, if you remember, is like from the Playbook, where it can automatically pull assets into the app. There are some updates that need to be made from time to time. They are kind of like your website or WordPress site or whatever, where you do need to do some maintenance at time. And everything we do is based on HTML5 code. So we can make those updates. Your in-house developers can make those changes as well. They just need to know how to do coding. And we're happy to have that kind of partnership with our clients so that they can be self-functioning, or that we can simply make those updates on our own.
Fantastic, Don. That's all we have for questions. Looks like a couple other folks really enjoyed this session. So as I mentioned, this will be recorded. We'll get it out to folks that may want to take another look at what the art of the possible is. I know I'd want to rewind and take a look at all those experience apps that you have. And fair to say that we could probably either contact you at your email address that's here, or check out peopleproductions.com to see more details about the art of the possible. And again, a lot of this art of the possible, it's powered by Showpad to make that easy to quickly deploy to your sales team, update to your sales team, tie into your content, and get it in the hands of your customers, through an interactive tool, a secure microsite we call shared space. So this is just where the sales motion is going in B2B sales and remote sales, but we still want to make sure that we're ready for when we get back to in-person selling, as you mentioned. So Don, thanks a lot. This is a great session.
Thanks, Russell, for joining me today. And I appreciate everyone else who joined online. Thank you.
Hope this was informative. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.